So let's go ahead and watch their discussion on Isaiah 53, very important, and then we'll be out after that. Let's see what they got to say.
Shalom, my friends. And this is the long-anticipated part 2 to my initial video regarding the infamous debate between Rabbi TOVIA Singer and Dr. Michael Brown. And this is covering, of course, Isaiah 53, which is a point of contention between Jews and Christians throughout the ages. So get ready for a long and wild ride, because my position on this might not be what you are expecting regarding what TOVIA said. In fact, I have a lot of things I would do differently than what TOVIA Singer did in this debate, and I am going to show you how even TOVIA himself has changed his style and how he does this today versus when he did it now, and how I would approach this if I were to debate Dr. Michael Brown, which of course I'm always open to doing, but especially now, I don't think Dr. Brown is going to take me up on the challenge. So without further ado,
I will probably
I gotta go.
Go.
Here.
Then go.
I'm scared of Isaiah 53. I'm scared that I might convert when I listen to it.
We know you. We know you are. We know you're terrified.
Okay, I gotta go. Thanks, everyone. See you.
Get out of here. All right. Bye, AP.
somebody in the comments was asking me if AP was really an atheist. Is he really a covert Christian? I don't know, guys. What do you think in the comments? Tell me. And by the way, like, share, and subscribe. Let's get this word out. We want to be able to show the truth of the Torah, the falsehood of Jesus, all that fun stuff. So please share, like, subscribe. Does a lot of good. Anyway, continuing.
After it
Little weakling.
discussed and then discussed some more when it comes to a graphic illustration, Messianic Jews say, of the Messiah. Do you see Jesus anywhere in Isaiah 53?
No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, not only don't I see Jesus in Isaiah 53, there are many Christians that don't see Jesus in Isaiah 53. If any of you tonight want to go, don't do it tonight Shabbos, but you can do it before Shabbos, get yourself a New English Bible with an Oxford annotation. These are written by Gentiles, and they all wrote that it's talking about the Jewish people and not the Messiah. Get yourself a Revised Standard Version, Oxford annotation. The same thing. Why are all these Christians, and I know Michael said they're not real Christians, but why? These are Christians, they're translators and commentators. From the Christian standpoint, why are they all backing up the Jewish people that this is not talking about the Messiah? Meaning the Messiah of David. Do not confuse that with any Messiah. King David was a Messiah. The priests were Messiahs.
So this is Rabbi TOVIA Singer's first mistake. I'm just going to call it out for what it is. What he's doing is he is creating a false dichotomy between the interpretation that Isaiah 53 would refer to the Messiah and the idea that Isaiah 53 would refer to Israel. Remember, the Messiah is a part of Israel. But unfortunately, the way that Rabbi Singer is presenting the argument is more in a dichotomy where, well, either you believe it's about the Messiah or you believe it's about Israel, which there's no reason to do that when you already acknowledge the fact that the Messiah is a part of Israel. The other part of this mistake, and this is a little more minor, but I'll explain why I consider it a mistake, is that he is presenting the Christian position without letting Dr. Brown define what the Christian position is. And he's basically he's kind of creating a straw man, because he's saying, well, these Christians who Dr. Brown doesn't even agree with say that this is about Israel, Isaiah 53, but I know you don't agree with them and they're not real Christians. But the problem with that is that it gives Dr. Michael Brown an opening to try and do an internal critique of what the Talmud would say, or what, all these different rabbinic sources say about Isaiah 53. And while I'm not saying that Dr. Brown does that in good faith, but the way that TOVIA opened the conversation, right? The way that I would have done this is because 100% of the time when you're debating, educated missionaries on this, whether it be Anthony Rogers over here, or I don't know, David Wood, I don't know, he doesn't really debate Jews so much, but for sure, Dr. Michael Brown made a living off of this. He loves to exploit rabbinic sources, right? When Jews say things that are a little bit sloppy or don't really say the entire picture, Dr. Michael Brown loves to internally critique what rabbinic Jews say. So you want to be careful the way you speak about this. And unfortunately, Tovia was being very sloppy here. And I'll prove to you later in the video that Tovia actually does not use this approach anymore. For any of you who are saying, you know, oh, why would you critique Tovia on this? Well, I'll show you. Tovia actually changed the way that he even debates this in general, and you'll see how.
But talking about the Messiah, the son of David, who comes at the end of the days, only him am I referring to. Now, why? Because,
But aren't there some rabbis that believe that Isaiah 53 is speaking of the Messiah?
again,
Even Sid is like right in there. Oh, the rabbis, but the rabbis, right? So unfortunately, the way Tovia presents this once again leaves him open for that. And not that it makes any difference, right? Because once again, the Messiah is a part of Israel, but the way he's presenting it creates an opportunity for them to create a smokescreen argument that distracts, and that's exactly what they do throughout the entirety of this section.
I have to correct, said it's just what I just said a moment ago. Don't say just the Messiah said. I know it's your show, but I've got to correct you. Say the Messiah from David. No, there is not one, and I will say this emphatically, there is not one rabbinic tradition writing anywhere that says that it's referring to the Messiah, the son of David. They say that this is a...
It's part of me thinks it's messed up what he just did. He's saying Isaiah 53 is not about Israel, is not about the Messiah, it's about Israel. And then he gets asked, well, aren't there rabbis who thought that this is about the Messiah? He says, not the Messiah, son of David. They don't say specifically Messiah, son of David. They're talking about a Messiah. Okay, so there are rabbis who interpreted this as about a Messiah. So not Israel, a Messiah. But they didn't specify the Messiah, the son of David. So some other Messiah, but not Messiah, the son of David. And he's raising that as an objection.
Yeah. And he's wrong. But I thought you were going to point this out. He says it just is about Israel, right? That's the position. And then there's these other Christian alleged sources that are saying they're agreeing with Jews, they're backing them up. And then he turns around, he's asked if it's about Messiah, and that's where he goes off talking about whether it says of David or not. But notice, it's not Israel on this interpretation. So he's acting like that this is just how everybody lines up, right, in Jewish tradition.
In other words, there are people who think this is about a person.
Yeah, this is about an individual. So,
Yeah.
you can...
So this is kind of silly, the way they're approaching this, because if it's any individual other than the Messiah, according to, let's say you found a Jewish interpretation that says it's about Moses, which exists somewhere, right? That wouldn't prove the point of the Christians, right? This is what confuses me about how Christians think they won something. Like, for example, in Isaiah 49, right, I presented this to Dr. Brown when I called into his show, and I got him to agree with me that Isaiah 49, verse 3, was speaking about the same servant as Isaiah 53, and then he tried to focus on rabbinic commentaries that said it was about Isaiah.
Mentioned in Isaiah chapter 49, 3 is the same servant as the servant in Isaiah 53. Is that a correct statement that you...
Yeah, that he's an individual.
that?
Yeah, that he's an individual. Many of the rabbinic commentaries believe that he was the prophet Isaiah himself, and he's called Israel in chapter 3, in verse 3, and that he represents Israel or embodies Israel. But yeah, so I don't believe it's the prophet Isaiah. I believe it's the Messiah. But like many rabbinic commentaries, I believe it's an individual there. So 100%, yes, sir.
Notice that Dr. Brown isn't messing around here. He immediately starts bringing up rabbinic commentaries to try and stall the inevitable exploitation of his argument that I'm about to show you.
I believe that the beginning of... Go ahead.
Oh, just to clarify, so you don't believe that in Isaiah 49:3 that the servant refers to anybody but the Messiah? It can only refer to the Messiah.
My understanding, it's possible that originally the words were spoken by the prophet, but he was speaking beyond himself, just like Isaiah 61. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me. and ultimately that's taken to be the words of the Messiah. But yeah, my understanding is that Isaiah 49, the first roughly 13 verses, are a direct prophecy about the Messiah. Yes, sir.
No one else.
No one else.
Well, okay, so that's about an individual. Wonderful. But it's not the Messiah. So you claiming that it's about an individual doesn't give you an in to say that, well, the rabbis validate it being about the Messiah, because an individual doesn't mean that that has to be the Messiah. That's the point, right? So it doesn't make any sense, because they don't have a clear criteria as to what they believe the Messiah, what prophecies should be regarding exclusivity to the Messiah. And that's what we're going to get into.
Whatever you want to tack on to the end there, fine, but they're still thinking it's an individual. But the other thing is, it's just not true. When you typically, if you see a statement that something in Jewish literature, it's about the Messiah, and nothing else is added, the default assumption is it's Messiah ben David. You would have to add something additional if it's going to be about some other Messianic figure.
In other words, if every time there's a reference to Messiah, but it doesn't specify son of David, you think, oh, and there's another Messiah. Oh, and there's another Messiah. Oh, and here's another Messiah. It didn't say son of David, so it must be another Messiah. And so you end up with all these Messiahs.
So here's something interesting, is that David Wood is making a decent point. However, this is something that I discussed with Dr. Michael Brown, because at the beginning of the debate, I'm going to try and remember. So this is here. Okay, so at the beginning of the debate, there was a discussion about the commonalities that they have between each other. So we're going to go to, so that's 32254. So let's go to, I think it's around 39 minutes in. You'll see, he says,
in Near Eastern Languages and Literatures from New York University. He's Dean and Director of Messiah Biblical Institute. And what I'd like is for the audience to get to know both of you a little and find out how much you have in common, because I believe an Orthodox Jew has a great deal in common with a Messianic Jew. Tuvia, we'll start with you.
Hey, I just wanted to point out, I want to let them talk here. That point that's Sid Roth, right? Is that Sid Roth? The point that he just made, hey, I believe you guys have a lot in common. That's easy to overlook. Because we're going through something recently with Cosmic Skeptic, and Cosmic Skeptic was...
So, I agree with the Apologetics Roadshow, also known as David Wood here. It is important that we find common ground in discussions like this. I absolutely agree. And that's why I asked Dr. Michael Brown specifically on his show about whether or not certain prophecies were exclusive to the Messiah, son of David, and no one else. And here's what he had to say about that.
David's mentioned almost 1,000 times in the Bible. A couple of times when it says David, like Ezekiel 37 or Hosea 3, it's referring to the Messiah, okay? Otherwise...
So what he said is that in Ezekiel chapter 37 and Hosea chapter 3, it refers, when it says David here, so it says, and my servant David shall be king over them, and one shepherd shall be for them all, and they shall walk in my ordinances and observe my statutes and perform them. So Dr. Michael Brown himself agrees that when it says David here, it's my servant David shall be king over them, that refers to the Messiah, son of David, and no one else. Okay, so there we have a standard here. Then we have, and I want to make this clear, in the context of this is at the end of days, right? It says that they will no longer be two nations. This is after the final exile. It says, behold, I will gather them from all the nations, from every side, and bring them to the land. And then it says, my servant David shall be king over them. So this is after the final ingathering of the exiles, which has not happened yet. I wanted to emphasize that. So then in Hosea chapter 3, it also says, afterward, it says, for the children of Israel shall remain many days, having neither king, nor prince, nor sacrifice, nor pillar, nor ephod, nor teraphim. And it says, afterwards, the children of Israel shall return to the Lord their God and David their king. and shall come trembling to the Lord and to his goodness at the end of days, right? Both of these prophecies have that in common, that it describes a Davidic king, and then it says that the nations will know that I am the Lord who sanctifies Israel when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. So this is a future prophecy that has not happened yet after the final ingathering of the exiles, right? Same thing with Hosea 3, because it's speaking about afterwards when the children of Israel return. So Jews and Christians agree. These are exclusively Messianic prophecies that talk about a Davidic king. And Dr. Brown agrees. This is the way I would approach this debate at the beginning, because here's something interesting. In Isaiah chapter 53, not once is the servant described as a king or as David. Not throughout the entirety of the servant songs is the servant described as a king or as David. So when we talk about common ground in a debate, as David Wood suggested at the beginning, I agree wholeheartedly. And what we know, if we were to have this debate and I were debating Dr. Michael Brown, at the beginning, I would say, what do we agree on? Well, we agree that Ezekiel 37, verse 24, when it says a Davidic king is going to rule over Israel at the end of days, after the final ingathering of the exile, of the exiles, and there's going to be a sanctuary in the midst of them forever. That's about the Messiah. When it says that the children of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God after they have had no king and no prince and no sacrifice, and then at the end of days they're going to come to the Lord their God and David their king. When it says David their king, that's referring to the Messiah and only the Messiah. So there we have two examples of prophecies that we agree upon. So we've built up mutually agreed upon criteria for Messianic prophecy. Which of these is not like the other? Isaiah 53, there's no mention of a king and there's no mention of David. So while this alone isn't proving, definitively one way or the other, it lends significant credibility to the mutual claims of Davidic kingship being exclusively or very specific, because the other option you have, if you want to say that this refers to like a resurrected David or something, but Jews and Christians don't interpret this way typically. If you ask Dr. Brown, he said this refers to the Messiah, not to a resurrected David. So if you disagree with Dr. Brown, that's on you. But point being, these are Messianic prophecies. These two prophecies, Hosea chapter 3, verse 5, and Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 24, according to Dr. Brown, we agree. They are exclusively speaking about the Messiah when they speak of a Davidic king. And if you want to see how this works in a real debate setting, I debated Radar Apologetics, who uses Dr. Michael Brown's arguments verbatim regarding, where does it say that the Messiah is supposed to do X, Y, Z? This is a parroting talking point that Dr. Michael Brown says that Radar Apologetics parrots from. And this is how I approach it regarding specificity of Messianic prophecy referring to a Davidic king. And it shows the inconsistent standard that Christians have. So give this a watch. I made a video. I'll put it in the description.
Do you understand Daniel 9:24 to refer to the initiation of the new covenant of Jeremiah 31?
I see Daniel 9:24-27 as being the initiation of the new covenant within the timeline of what the new covenant is supposed to do at the time period that's supposed to be unraveled. It's not an issue.
Other than your position on the chronology of the new covenant needing to be initiated before the destruction of the second temple in Daniel 9, can you show me anywhere else in the Tanach where the new covenant is indicated to be initiated before the destruction of the second temple?
I think one prophecy is good enough to show that.
Okay, can we agree that Hosea chapter 3 verse 4 states that Israel will experience an exile for many years where we will not have a king or a sacrifice?
Yeah.
Do you believe that we are living in this state of exile today?
Yeah.
Can we both agree that Hosea chapter 3 verse 5 says that David their king that this refers to the future Messianic king who will rule at the end of days, as the verse explicitly states?
I think the David the king who is to come,
Who is it?
is the Messiah who will
Exactly.
come. And
Thank
he
you.
came in the first century of the way Daniel 9:24-27 came.
Even though it says, can we agree that Hosea chapter 3, verse 5 gives us no indication that David their king, aka the son of Messiah, son of David, must come before the final exile that we find ourselves in today?
Yehuda, there's more than one verse in the Bible.
Yeah,
So we need
but
to
I'm
let them
talking about this
communicate with
verse
each other,
specifically.
is what I'm saying.
I'm talking about this verse
So,
specifically. These verses.
Every verse is not exhaustive about every single thing. You have to line the passages
I
up.
agree.
Does
Can we
this verse
agree? I agree. Other than your position on the chronology of the new covenant needing to be initiated before the destruction of the second temple in Daniel 9, can you show me anywhere else in the Tanakh where the new covenant is indicated to be initiated before the destruction of the second temple?
I think one prophecy is good enough to show that. I think one prophecy is good enough to show that. I think one prophecy is good enough to show that. Yehuda, there's more than one verse in the Bible.
Yeah,
So we need
but
to
I'm
let them
talking about this
communicate
verse
with each other.
specific. These verses.
Every verse is not exhaustive about every single thing. You have to line the passages
I agree.
up. I think one prophecy is good enough to show that.
So that's how I would approach it. Unfortunately, Tovia is not, he doesn't have that leverage because he's trying to speak on behalf of Christians, and instead he's just going to get down a but the rabbis, and you'll see what happens. Anyway.
David, you think, oh, and there's another Messiah. Oh, and there's another Messiah. Oh, and here's another Messiah. It didn't say son of David, so it must be another Messiah. And so you end up with all these Messiahs.
Yeah. But there's a third point. Which is, the fact is, when you find, because there are plenty, this is why he's hedging a bit here, there are plenty of Jews throughout history who have said that it's talking about Messiah. The assumption in these comments is that it is Messiah ben David, precisely because once they say it's about the Messiah, now they've got to do something with what it says there about this figure. And so they bend over backwards trying to get it to not mean that he's going to die and so forth. They wouldn't be doing that if it's talking about Messiah ben Joseph. They'd only be doing that if by Messiah they meant Messiah ben David, because he's not the one they think is going to die. So my point is just, even though they don't all say ben David, the very fact that they're saying it's about Messiah, but then don't want to say that it speaks of his death, shows that they think it's Messiah ben David.
So this is kind of irrelevant because, quite frankly, if I were to argue this, I would simply say it refers to, Israel, Messiah included. That's the way I would approach it. So it's not really an issue as to whether or not it refers to Ben David or not. That's why I'm saying I disagree with Tovia's approach. Just sometimes when you give a little, it's not going to help their position to say that it's about the Messiah if you understand that it also refers to someone else other than the Messiah. Because then the Christians can't say, oh, well, this is a messianic prophecy that only Jesus could fulfill. Once the Messiah, and let's say it was just the Messiah in Isaiah, right? Now this isn't an exclusively messianic prophecy, and Christians can't say, wow, who's this speaking about? You could just as easily say it's about Isaiah as you could it be about, who they claim it to be in Jesus, which obviously we don't believe. But that's all you have to do. Once it's more than one person who can fit the bill of the servant, which is easily done, then that's the end of it. The Christian can't say that this is an exclusively messianic prophecy, and Isaiah 53 loses its efficacy as the quintessential messianic fulfillment in Jesus, because it's not exclusive to the Messiah. It could be just as well about Isaiah. It could be just as well be about Jeremiah. It could be just about any prophet, of righteousness who, put their life on the line. They would fit just as well. Anyway.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to get away from him dying, because Messiah ben Joseph is expected to die.
Interesting.
Person who are there some that say it is the Messiah?
No, they're saying it's a Messiah.
That's categorically.
Let me just
Sure,
let me just finish my sentence. When we think of the Holocaust, it's very difficult for us to, in any way, really conceptualize 6 million people. When I think of the Holocaust, I think of that person who threw himself against the electrical barbed wire and is dead. They're committing suicide. There is a moving portrait in our minds where we think of different things, and then that one individual that personifies the whole nation. Our rabbis understood that at the end of days, when the Messiah is going to come, there are great, great wars. They were just reflecting, of course, the words of Ezekiel and many others. And these great wars is going to be an individual, a Messiah, the son of Joseph. And that individual is going to get killed in war. And it's going to turn people to mourn for him. And when people are going to mourn for that individual, then people are going to actually become part of the holy remnant of the Jewish people.
Okay, we're going to have Dr. Michael Brown respond to that, but we've got to take a commercial break right now. Would you?
So I'm going to prove to you that Tovia Singer actually does not use this approach anymore. What I'm also going to prove to you is that Tovia Singer actually sort of had a debate against Dr. Michael Brown. Not in the way that you think, though. So first, I'm going to prove to you, for any of you thinking, no, Tovia Singer isn't doing, he's always debated the same way. He wouldn't go back on how he does things. Look, we can make mistakes. We can make teshuvah. Baruch Hashem, Tovia Singer made teshuvah. This was his debate against Dr. Solberg. That was in Nashville, Tennessee. I actually spent Shabbat with Rabbi Singer prior to him going Motzei Shabbat to Tennessee. So this was kind of surreal for me to see. Just right after this debate, I had just spent Shabbat with him. So anyway, watch what he says.
What I want to convey is that people do not understand what it is that Jewish people believe about Isaiah 53. We do not believe that Isaiah 53 is speaking about the righteous remnant of the Jews and not the Messiah. We don't believe the Messiah is not included in that. The Messiah is the most prominent figure at the end of days of the righteous remnant of the nation of Israel. And that's why the Talmud says, if you want examples of what will this remnant be like, of course, please do look at Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 12 through 16, that the nation of Israel will be humble and there'll be no deceit in his mouth. The same exact words as Isaiah 53. So the Targum,
which is beautiful.
You're right, and Isaiah 52 says, Avdi Mashiach, my servant, the Messiah. But then when you begin 53, it says it's talking about all the nation of Israel. Why?
So that's huge. What Tovia is doing this is exactly how I would approach it now. And this is what he should have done in his debate against Dr. Michael Brown. Just one thing, though. In a sense, Tovia was debating Dr. Michael Brown. Let's prove it.
And even someone like Rabbi Singer that you debated, it's very interesting that he challenged you without background in this, right, as opposed to areas where you had more background, whereas he's refused to debate me now for over 30 years. We did a debate that Sid Roth hosted. That's been out widely, and he's refused to debate me, interact with me under any circumstance. Now it's over 30 years, which should tell you something. In fact, he's refused to debate some other Messianic Jewish scholars over the years, which should also tell you something.
And I know that's why I was selected as well, because I was, easy target. He didn't know that you were going to be so kind to help me.
Well, and that you were going to be such a careful student of the Word and prepare so thoughtfully as well.
Well, you'll notice, and you
Did you hear that? Dr. Michael Brown helped Dr. Solberg prepare for the debate against Rabbi Tovia Singer. So, there's your debate, my friends. You wanted Tovia Singer versus Dr. Michael Brown. There it is. Okay, I'm partly kidding. Look, I would have loved to see that debate to myself. That's why I debate. I challenge Dr. Brown directly to a debate myself, because this is how I would do it. So, Baruch Hashem, Tovia was able to, because remember, they like to sling the Targum around. Remember, the Targum is actually the earliest source for the commentary of, basically a rabbinic commentary. So Christians love to isolate the part where it says in Isaiah 52:13, where it says, my Messiah shall prosper, it shall be exalted and extolled, and it shall be very, very strong. And they ignore the very next part where it says their appearance and their brightness being worse than the sons of men. Remember what that's quoting from. Isaiah 52, verse 14, it says, his form beyond human semblance, meaning that the his is translated as a plurality in the Targum of Isaiah 52:14, which proves there's a plurality of people here, right? Not just according to the Targum, the earliest, source that Jews and Christians agree is a rabbinic commentary that clearly Christians, they want to quote from the Targum all the time. Same thing with Isaiah 53, verse 10. It says, it was a pleasure of the Lord to purify the remnant of his people in order to cleanse their souls of sins, that they might see the kingdom of their Messiah. Of course, the Christian brain shuts off there and the Messiah. But it says that their sons and their daughters might multiply and prolong their days. What does it say in Isaiah 53, verse 10? It says, he might see his offspring, and he will have prolonged days. What does it say in the Targum? That they will multiply, and they will prolong their days. So if you love the Targum so much, it's exactly as Tovia said in this video, when he said specifically that it's not just about the Messiah, it's also about the remnant, at the very least.
I don't mean to say that in a disparaging way. Forgive me for that. What I want to convey is that people do not understand what it is that Jewish people believe about Isaiah 53. We do not believe that Isaiah 53 is speaking about the righteous remnant of the Jews and not the Messiah. We don't believe the Messiah is not included in that. The Messiah is the most prominent figure at the end of days of the righteous remnant of the nation of Israel. And that's what it's...
That's the way he should have done it in this debate. If he would have just argued from that perspective, then Dr. Brown would have been cooked. And we wouldn't be in this back and forth about the, Talmudic sources and silly wagers. It wouldn't have happened. Let's keep watching.
To respond. Sure. Well, the thing that really got my interest, and that I was astonished to hear, it's the first time I've ever heard it from the mouth of a rabbi, was that there are no Jewish interpretations of Isaiah 53 that it refers to the Messiah, namely the Messiah, son of David. Actually, that's utterly baffling. There's a whole volume that Tovia is familiar with called the interpretation of Isaiah 53 according to the Jewish interpreters. That's the rough title of it. It was edited originally by a British scholar named Eberhard Pusey, and then after that he got a Jewish scholar to work on it, a Christian scholar to translate. The fact is, it gives dozens and dozens and dozens of Jewish interpretations of Isaiah 53, beginning with what's called the Targum, the Aramaic translation. There are many rabbis that say it speaks of the Messiah. Now, that doesn't mean that it does or it doesn't, just like there are, yes, Christians that say it speaks of Israel, or those in Christian churches that say it speaks of Israel. There are many, many candidates as to who it speaks of. I'm convinced without a doubt that when you read it, and I'd encourage any Jewish listener to sit down with a Hebrew Bible and read Isaiah 52:13 to 53:12 out loud, prayerfully, thoughtfully, and ask himself, who does this speak of? But in the 16th century, one of the leading Jewish scholars living in Israel was named Rabbi Moshe al-Sheikh, and he said, 16th century, all of our holy rabbis agree that this is a prophecy of the Messiah.
And just in case you guys aren't familiar with this resource, this is Reb Moshe Shulman's webpage called Judaism's Answer. And you can see it's judaismsanswer.com. And for anyone who wants more information on how to refute the contextual abuse of rabbinic literature by Christian missionaries, this website is really unparalleled. It goes through a lot of the most famous, the Driver Neubauer stuff that, they quote out of context all the time within the Talmud. Moshe al-Sheikh, who Dr. Brown just mentioned in the debate with Rabbi TOVIA Singer. And it goes through and debunks all of the information that, Christians try to use to try to, Rashi, like they say, like, oh, Rashi made up the idea that Isaiah 53 is about Israel and it was never, a part of that. And you can see it goes through the Targum. Anyway, this is a wonderful resource if you have any questions. There's also the Crispin, this rabbi, he's not even a rabbi from what I understand, this Ibn Crispin fellow. There's a section all on that. and it directly addresses Dr. Brown's stuff. So give this page a look. If you're a Christian, it's checkmate for you. Stop using rabbinic commentaries and, trying to justify your worship or belief in Jesus, because the Talmud does not support your position on that. And if you're a Jew and you want a good resource to refute what Christians are saying regarding contextual abuse of the Talmud, this, specifically for Isaiah 53, I can't find a better resource. So enjoy.
Now, the fact is, there are other opinions. And let's remember that the Messiah is the representation of his people. In other words, the Messiah is the head, the chief of his people. So that there are certain similarities between what the Messiah does and what happens to the people. We are united, in the Messiah as one. But the fact of the matter is, and as I said, I was baffled to hear him say this, there are many Jewish interpreters, including rabbis I've talked to in Brooklyn, who say, yes, this is a prophecy of the Messiah, King David.
Now, can you see in Isaiah 50?
So this was a problem, right? This is exactly what I was saying, is that now Dr. Michael Brown is setting up the opportunity to internally critique Tovia Singer. If Tovia would have not approached, saying that there's, other opinions that disagree with Dr. Michael Brown on this from the beginning, the Tanach is already on Rabbi Singer's side. He knows this. I think sometimes we want to, instead of going for the checkmate, he was trying to take all the pieces off of the board, and he was missing the forest for the trees. Like, yeah, okay, there's Christians that interpret it this way. The problem is that he's just going to pick off all your pieces too, and you end up with a stalemate, right? I don't think that Tovia lost this. I think that he ended up with a stalemate because he was arguing. Basically, Dr. Brown was able to take him down a road that was not related to the game at all, and he ended up playing a different game, and he lost at that game, but he never really lost the core game. It was like they were playing chess, and then Dr. Brown threw the pieces off the board and said, we're going to play checkers now, and then Tovia lost the game of checkers. That's the way this went down, because they didn't really come to a conclusion on Isaiah 53. It just became, what do the rabbis believe about Isaiah 53? And Tovia, unfortunately, backed himself into a wall because he said something that, for whatever reason, maybe he just didn't know that these sources existed. This part of the debate, I don't see. The other part obviously was edited, and there was some sort of nefarious thing going on. This part I can't really excuse. Like, I'm gonna say what it is. Like, Tovia messed up here, and I'm glad that he was able to rectify his mistake in the most recent debate he had with Dr. Solberg. But here, I can't really. I can't. There's nothing to really say.
53. I just want to ask this one question. I'll let you respond. Can you see in Isaiah 53 how a Orthodox rabbi might construe that it is Israel or a righteous remnant within Israel, and why that might be wrong?
Sure. Naturally, I read the scriptures, and I believe I'm understanding them correctly. And I believe that a rabbi is reading them through colored glasses. Of course, that's what a rabbi told me, that he's reading it accurately, and I'm reading it through colored glasses. The fact of the matter is, we both have reasons for our interpretation, and we categorically disagree with each other. Many times in the book of Isaiah, where it speaks of the servant of the Lord, it's referring to the people as a whole. Sometimes it's referring to a remnant of the people. Other passages, like Isaiah 49, where it speaks of Israel initially, then it says that the role of this servant is to regather Israel. So in other words, this is speaking about an Israel or a servant or a seed within the nation as a whole. So
that is the point that you can exploit in a debate with Dr. Michael Brown. He just said that the servant of Isaiah 49, verse 3, and I had a discussion with this about, what he believed on this on his radio show. There's several videos. I'll put the links in the description where I discuss this with him. He believes that when it says in Isaiah 49:3 that the servant is Israel, he believes that's secret code word for Jesus.
But yeah, my understanding is that Isaiah 49, the first roughly 13 verses, are a direct prophecy about the Messiah. Yes, sir.
No one else.
No one else.
So that is where you are able to show the eisegesis, literally, of Christianity, showing that they are not at home with what the Bible says, with what the Tanakh is telling them. Because when you go to Isaiah 49, verse 3, this is one of the verses that Tovia likes to use, and rightly so, to show that the servant is Israel. It says, he said to me, you are my servant Israel, about whom I will boast. Where in the Hebrew Bible is the word Israel used to exclusively refer to the Messiah, son of David? Nowhere. But in this instance, Dr. Michael Brown wants to say, oh, well, how can Israel bring back Israel, and all this nonsense that Christians will say, like, oh, Jesus he's the only light to the nations, and what has Israel done to bring healing? I did a whole video on this. I'll put the link in the description, where I show that, and I discussed this with Dr. Michael Brown directly, where I show him that, and I put it to his own standards too, right? In the New Testament, for example, in the book of Matthew, if you look in Matthew chapter 2, the second chapter, and it says, out of Egypt I called my son, right? And they apply that to Jesus, right? That, because they say during King Herod's reign, Joseph took Jesus to Egypt and then came back. So they quote that verse out of context, and they say, out of Egypt I called my son, and they say that was a fulfillment. But then when you go in Hosea chapter 11, which is where the verse comes from, and you actually look at out of Egypt I called my son, it says, for when Israel was young I loved him, and from Egypt I called my son. The more they called to them, the more they went away from them, and to the Baalim they would slaughter sacrifices. So this is talking about a sinful Israel. So if you ask a Christian why the servant of Isaiah 49 can't refer to Israel or even the righteous remnant, they'll say, well, because they're sinful, which is a double standard, because once again, in the case of Matthew chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, well, out of Egypt I called my son, that can refer to sinful Israel, and it can refer to their quote-unquote sinless Messiah in Jesus. But Isaiah chapter 49, verse 3, oh no, it has to only be Jesus, right? And that is Dr. Brown's official position on this. Like I said, I did a whole video on it. I'll put it in the description. And that is another way you can exploit the Christian position, because once again, where is the mention of David in Isaiah 49, verse 3 through 6? Nowhere. There is no mention of a king or David or any of that. It says, what's the problem with the remnant bringing back the rest of Israel and then serving as a light to the nations? That's the chronology. It's not, I toiled in vain and then I'm going to go to the Gentiles and then Israel's going to come back. That's the way, the Christians like to interpret it. It says the chronology is, first the servant toils in vain, which would be the remnant. Then the rest of Israel and Jacob are gathered back to him, the remnant. And then it says, it is too light for you to be my servant to bring back Jacob and Israel, but also to a light to the nation. So the Christians jump the gun and they say, oh, well, we didn't have healing yet. And you'll see Dr. Brown goes on that. And if you actually read Isaiah 49 according to its chronology, they're jumping the gun. They're not supposed to be healed yet, because Israel has to be first gathered back. That's the process.
He might say, well, the servant of the Lord in many of the passages and in the context is often Israel. That's why I see it as referring to Israel. And look, the fact is we've suffered, we've been abused, we've been rejected, etc., etc. However, it can't work. You go through verse by verse. It cannot work for the people as a whole.
Give me one example.
Well, one example is, according to the Torah, the people as a whole, if they were obedient, if they lived in accordance with the scriptures, they would be blessed. They would be the highest of all the nations. They would not come under any of the covenant curses. In other words, the people as a whole could not suffer what the servant of the Lord suffers here if they were righteous, and yet the servant is righteous. Also,
so this doesn't make any sense. Actually, Dr. Brown did a video. I'll also put the video in the description, where in Psalm 44, he actually admits that this is about the remnant. When it says at the end of the psalm, it says, all of this has befallen us. We have not forgotten you, neither have we betrayed your covenant. So this isn't speaking about wayward people. This is speaking about a remnant of people who keep the covenant. Our heart has not turned back, nor have our steps turned away from your path. So they're followers of the way of God. Even when you crushed us in place of serpents, you covered us with darkness. If we forgot the name of our God and spread our palms to a strange God, will God not search this out? For he knows the secrets of the heart. So he's saying that this servant, right, or the remnant here, is saying, we followed the covenant. It is for your sake that we are killed all the time, that we are considered as sheep for the slaughter. Why do you hide your countenance? Why do you forget our affliction and oppression? My God, why have you forsaken me? It fits like a glove. This is a collective group of people that follow the Torah, that follow the path of God. And like I said, I can show a video where Dr. Brown literally co-signs this and says it's the remnant.
Well, what do we do with Psalm 44? Easy. It's the prayer of the righteous remnant.
So which is it, Dr. Brown? Make up your mind. Is the remnant not allowed to suffer at all? Or, because they're keeping the Torah? Or is the remnant allowed to be sheep for the slaughter like it says in Psalm 44? Make up your mind. This is the hypocrisy of Christianity. And Dr. Brown, but you already knew that.
Israel.
That was an important point there. So Rabbi TOVIA is saying that this is the righteous remnant who are suffering, and Michael Brown points out, no, if they were righteous, he says, you would not be punished. If you're righteous, if the people are righteous, then this is not going to happen to you. And yet the suffering servant of Isaiah 53 is the righteous one, and he's suffering on behalf of the people. So if it refers to the people, then that would violate the Torah, because the Torah says that if the people are righteous, then they will not be subjected to the curses of the covenants. And so that's interesting.
Yeah, that's a huge point. There are plenty of examples in the Old Testament of righteous individuals suffering. Job, there's a whole book about a righteous figure suffering. Look at the Psalms. There are Psalms galore of a righteous individual suffering. Psalm 88 is so dark that it doesn't even show any light at the end of the tunnel, and the person is evidently righteous. So what do you do with that? But on the other hand, the Torah does say that the people of God as a nation would be blessed if they're obedient. Yeah. So when you go to the book of Isaiah, I mean, it's a colossal misreading or a failure to read or retain what you've already read in Isaiah to get to Isaiah 53 and try and identify it with the Jews. The whole point that's been made working up to this passage is that Israel is not this, not even a remnant.
Well, what do we do with Psalm 44? Easy. It's the prayer of the righteous remnant.
In fact, the remnant will be righteous precisely because of this figure. That's what a reading of Isaiah will give you.
Suffered for its own.
Like, the idea here is that they can't really wrap their head around what the role of the remnant is. They want to put all of the remnant's responsibilities on Jesus. In fact, sometimes they will use the expression a righteous remnant of one, which is a walking contradiction in and of itself, right? When I discuss Isaiah 49 with Christians, they'll say a righteous remnant of one. What does that mean, right? It doesn't. It's basically a double speak. It's a oxymoronic way of trying to reconcile the idea that they're replacing the remnant with who they want Jesus to be, when the remnant is described as being a collective group of people who suffer in Psalm 44, like we just read. There's no way around it, and the imagery is almost identical to that of Isaiah 53 with the suffering and the sheep to the slaughter. These aren't the sinners. These are the ones who or the most righteous of the nation. So you can't pull this double speak off when you're actually being faithful to what the totality of Scripture says.
Sins, not for the sins of the nations, nor has Israel suffering brought healing to the nations. For example, Israel suffered at the hands of the Assyrians. The Assyrians overdid the punishment. What happened to Assyria? They're gone. Israel, the Jewish people, suffered at the hands of the Babylonians. The Babylonians overdid the punishment. What happened to them? They're gone. Israel suffered at the hands of the Greeks. That empire is gone. At the hands of the Romans. That empire is gone. So it hasn't brought
Let's
healing.
get a response.
So this is a weak point that unfortunately Tovia doesn't really address adequately. So I'm going to address it here. In Zechariah chapter 8, right, I talk about this all the time. It says that after the fasts of the Holy Temple that, only rabbinic Jews observe to this very day turn into festivals of joy because the third temple will be built, obviously. We won't be mourning for the temple anymore. It says that many people will come from many nations, and the inhabitants will say to each other, let us go pray before the Lord of hosts and entreat the Lord of hosts. And it says, so said the Lord in those days, when 10 men of all the languages will take hold of the skirt of a Jewish man, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. That is why the chronology of Isaiah 49 says that first, the nation of Israel is going to be restored back to its former glory. First, the remnant will bring back the rest of Israel and Jacob, and then the servant will serve as a light to the nations, right? So the Christians jump the gun and say, oh, the Gentiles have it, the Jews are a bunch of silly, stupid people that don't understand, they have scales on their eyes, whatever. But that's not what Zechariah chapter 8 says, and it's no coincidence why this messianic prophecy is not anywhere found in the New Testament, because they can't reconcile it. The New Testament doesn't really have any way to deal with this. But when you look at Zechariah chapter 14, you see the same thing, right? So Dr. Brown just said the idea of the nations overdoing the punishment and now they're all gone. So here, and this is, you can see the stage is set for this, that all the nations will gather to Jerusalem and to wage war. This hasn't happened yet. This is the battle of Gog and Magog, the infamous battle. And it says that, there's going to be, the city's going to be captured and half the city's going to go into exile. And, hopefully this isn't, too horrid for us to experience. But you see that after the events of this, it says, it will come to pass that everyone left of the nations who came up against Jerusalem will go up from year to year and prostrate themselves to the King, the Lord of hosts, and celebrate the festival of tabernacles. And so that's also aligned with what we read in Zechariah chapter 8, that they're going to go to Jerusalem, right? And to the Jews and say, we have heard that God is with you, to celebrate a Jewish holiday, not to believe in Jesus, that he died for your sins on a cross, and go, we've heard that God is with you, but we actually know who your God is. That's not what Zechariah 8 says. That's not what Zechariah 14 says. That's not what the Tanach says. It's not what Isaiah 49 says either. It says that Israel, the servant, first is the remnant, will bring back the rest of besieged Israel and Jacob, and then serve as a light to the nation. There is your healing. That's when the nation of Israel will serve as a light to the nations, and then all of these events will happen where if they go up to Jerusalem, then they will be able to experience the blessings of rain, and they won't have plagues, and they will live peacefully. That is where the healing will take place. But to jump the gun and say, oh, I believe in Jesus and now I'm all saved and I don't have to keep the Torah. Well, too bad. You're going to be going up from year to year to celebrate the Festival of Tabernacles after all the nations. And you can see after all of this, after October 7th, there's very much focus on Jerusalem. When this gets fulfilled, Bezrat Hashem, and it won't be, as horrible, may Hashem give us Rahmanas, that it won't happen, so terribly. Ultimately, we will be saved, as it says in Zechariah chapter 12, and we will be able to serve as that light and healing for the nations, and they will come up from year to year and celebrate Sukkot. That's the way it is said in the Tanakh.
Response now from Rabbi TOVIA.
Well, first of all, I'm going to ask Mike after the show, if he cannot find even one writing anywhere where Isaiah 53 is talking about the Messiah, the son of David, will he drop his messianic stuff? That's first of all. Secondly, let's take a look at the moving portrait.
Don't miss that challenge, because then Michael Brown flips it later on. So Tovia Singer says,
What
hey,
was
if
it again?
he says, if you can't find one rabbi who thinks that this is referring to the Messiah, the son of David, then will you renounce all your messianic stuff? And then Michael Brown later on responds, if I can show you a rabbi who says that it's talking about the Messiah, the son of David, will you become messianic? And Tovia says, yes. But I don't know what happened after that. So
This is a huge mistake on Tovia's part. Once again, I would not approach it this way. I would simply upfront say, yes, it can refer to the Messiah. And you already saw when he was debating against Dr. Solberg, he said it can refer to the Messiah. So Tovia learned from his mistake here. So Baruch Hashem. This is why I wanted to highlight this debate, is that this was not his highlight best performance, even if the debate was tampered with. And thank God he's upped his game, and I respect him for that.
Oh, that's just too easy. I pulled this off the shelf because this is the book that I think, if I heard Dr. Brown correctly, he was referring to. It's a compilation of Jewish commentary on Isaiah 53. So it just goes down through the centuries, quoting everything from the Talmud through medieval rabbis on down until the time this was compiled. And I could just flip through this, and it doesn't just say Messiah, but it will literally say things like Messiah the King, which makes it clear it's not talking about the Josephite Messiah. And it's not even clear that all these sources even believe in two messiahs.
Multiple
just because
messiahs.
You get that in some cases, it doesn't mean that everybody holds that. But in any case, these guys specifically say Messiah the King. They're talking about the Davidic Messiah.
Interesting. All right, let's see what he says.
Of the Holocaust again. We have a mother with her infant walking into the gas chamber. Now that little infant is clutched to that woman's breast, and she sits over there waiting for these supposed showers to go on, and gas comes in. I want to ask Mike Brown, I want to ask every Christian, every Jew out there, what sin did that little baby commit? Indeed, God gave permission. Yes, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26 talks about curses that will come upon the Jewish people, and yes, we have sinned. But the Gentile nations have gone too far, and God is very angry with them. If you read, for instance, Zechariah 1:15, and I am very angry with the nations that are at ease. Why are they at ease? Because this is not scripture, this is my paraphrase. Because they're at ease because they have been punishing unbelievable the Jewish people. For it I was wroth a little, and they helped to do harm. That means God was angry with the Jewish people a little. And this is the word of God. This is not a rabbinic source of any type. This is just straight what God says. I was angry with them a little bit, but the Gentile nations, you could take any example of our persecution. Yes, of course, we deserved what went on in the Holocaust. Some of us did to a certain point, but not what the Nazis gave to us. And that's indeed what the Gentile nations are saying in Isaiah 53, 1 through 10. Mike Brown says, if anybody would read the scriptures, Isaiah 52, 13 through 53, 12, you might think it's talking about the Messiah. See, if you ask Rabbi Singer, I would tell you, don't read stuff from 52:13, start from Isaiah chapter 1, and go through the whole book. Because if you read something out of context, and I'm not saying that Mike's position was to get you to do that, but if you, maybe that's what he did, and that's why he thought Isaiah 53 is talking about Messiah, because he started at 52:13. Ladies and gentlemen, start with Isaiah 1:1. Actually, start from Bereshit. If you read the...
Anthony, you're grinning, and you know way more about this, but I thought it was funny too. Wouldn't you love it if people actually went through all of Isaiah? Like, wouldn't you love that?
Yeah, you wouldn't get to Isaiah 53 and then think, oh, this could be Israel.
Why would you think it would be about Jesus, right? There's no. Once again, we discussed the agreed upon criteria, right? That Dr. Brown explicitly said was regarding messianic prophecy that Jews and Christians agree upon. Let's play it again.
Did anything that I said. So
David's mentioned almost 1,000 times in the Bible. A couple of times when it says David, like Ezekiel 37 or Hosea 3, it's referring to the Messiah, okay?
that's the agreed upon standard. So once again, at the beginning of the video, David Wood said, oh, it would be great if we could find points of agreement. Unfortunately, because Sid Roth was clearly a corrupt moderator, they weren't looking for points of agreement on terms of the Tanakh. Rather, it was points of agreement about things that were irrelevant to really what the discussion was about. And the point is that if you really care about what the Tanakh says, both Jews and Christians supposedly believe that in good faith that the Tanakh is the word of God. So that's where we agree. Quoting rabbinic commentaries or quoting Christian commentaries are not where we agree. So why are we shouting past each other, quoting commentaries at each other? Now, inevitably, like I said, the Christians do not have the upper hand on the Tanakh here. Anthony Rogers is delusional in saying, well, you wouldn't think it was Israel. Why would you think it was Jesus? Nobody was thinking it was Jesus at the time that this was written, right? They weren't thinking, oh, this can only refer to the Messiah, right? The Targum is emblematic of that, right? Obviously, Jesus wasn't born yet, so they wouldn't be thinking of Jesus, but they weren't thinking, if you want to see the snapshot of that, just look at the Targum. It's not exclusively speaking about it, but Hosea chapter 3, verse 5, and Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 24. I'll tell you this, I did my homework. No rabbinic commentaries say anything about it referring anything else than to the Messiah, son of David, when it says David, their king, or the king David. In those prophecies that Dr. Brown agrees refer only to the Messiah. So, and I'm sure all the Christians are going to be clanking away on Safaria trying to say, where does it say anything? Yeah, my servant David. So the only other option you have is that it's David himself, and that doesn't do anything for the Christian position, right? If you want to argue that and you want to ignore, like you would say, well, it says David, it's not really the Messiah. Doesn't do anything for the Christian. Maybe the Messiah is a resurrected David. Okay, that's not Jesus. Either way, the Christian loses. So that's how you play this game.
One thing you hear in the book over and over again is, oh, you people are in trouble and you deserve it. Now, I do think his point is well taken that
reading things in context is important.
That, yeah, but also that certain nations that were used to punish Israel overextend the punishment, but that doesn't really deal with the issue that Israel has sinned against God, violated the covenant, therefore justly deserves punishment from his hand, and therefore can't be the servant who's not suffering punishment for his own sins, but for others. And his suffering brings about the healing of others. Israel's suffering hasn't brought about the healing of the nations.
Just you wait, Anthony. By the way, I used to debate Anthony on Pal Talk. I would gladly debate him again on this very issue, since we know Dr. Brown probably isn't going to, so yeah, David Wood, whatever. I'm an open book on this. I would gladly debate this topic. This is where the nations will find their healing. After they, once again, overdo the punishment in the battle of Gog and Magog, and Jerusalem is attacked, eventually we're going to be saved, and it says that the nations are going to be required to go up from year to year to Jerusalem to celebrate the Festival of Tabernacles, also known as Sukkot. And if they don't, they won't have rain, and there will be a plague for Egypt. So that is where their healing will come into play, and they will want to do this because according to Zechariah chapter 8, they're going to come and they're going to say to the Jews, we have heard that God is with you. There's a reason why that's not in the New Testament, because Jesus has nothing to do with it.
In fact, I think Michael Brown will probably make this point, because I've heard him make it elsewhere, that God says that the nations that afflict Israel, even though they're serving his purpose as a rod of discipline against them, he's going to punish them for what they did, because their intentions are not to serve as God's agents of discipline. They just have murder in their hearts and conquest and so forth. So they have wicked intentions that God has used for his own holy ends. But so Israel suffering at their hands is going to result in them being punished, the nations. So if Isaiah 52 through 53 is talking about Israel suffering, then the problem is the suffering one there brings about the healing of the nations.
So once again, they're being myopic about this and ignoring the bigger picture. Read Zechariah chapter 14. Yes, there's suffering on both sides. The Jews in Jerusalem suffer, the city goes into exile, so there's suffering on both sides. Ultimately, there's a lot of bloodshed, unfortunately, before this. And this is future Messianic prophecy, right? This is related to Zechariah 12. Even Christians agree, right? This whole, and you can watch this video. This is where I discussed Zechariah 12 with Dr. Michael Brown, and I debunked the Christian position on that. You can watch this to get more information on that. But the point being that this is where the healing takes place. After, once again, the nations overdo the punishment, big surprise, then they will find the truth in God, and they will come up from year to year to Jerusalem to worship God and celebrate Sukkot. Hasn't happened yet. It just hasn't happened yet. So be patient, Anthony. Be patient, David Wood, because when this happens, it's going to be, the whole world's going to be focusing, and you're not going to miss it.
But elsewhere in Scripture, it speaks about those that are used to punish Israel not being healed as a result of it, but being punished as a result of it. So it doesn't work.
Just wanted to bring up an objection real quick. Where is it? Here we go. Yeah, just fast forward. Just keep scrolling. Where did it go? Here we go. Jimmy the Jew from Philly says, dude, Exodus 4:22 refers to Israel as a man. This is the basis for Jews claiming Isaiah 53 is about Israel. No, that's not the basis for claiming that Isaiah 53 is about Israel. It's not just, it refers to Israel as a man. That's not the reason. The reason in context is that Israel is referred to as a servant in Isaiah. And so, okay, here it's talking about a servant and so on, someone who's going to be suffering. And so that's the basis for it. And the response would be, that makes no sense there. And then if you go to Isaiah 49, it sounds like it's talking about Israel as the servant, but then starts talking about someone who's going to bring Israel back to God. And so if Israel's the servant, then why is Israel the servant who's going to suffer to bring Israel back to God? There's something that's not fitting together there.
So this is a perfect example of eisegesis, aka eisegesis, right? Once again, Isaiah 49:3 says, "You are my servant Israel, about whom I will boast." David Wood, where in the Tanach does it use the word Israel to exclusively refer to the Messiah, son of David, and no one else, aside from your eisegetical interpretation of Isaiah 49:3? Nowhere. I had this exact discussion with Dr. Michael Brown. Once again, I'll put the link in the description. It doesn't exist. So it's the Christian who is creating a problem that doesn't exist by saying, how does Israel bring back Israel? I mean, the same way that the righteous remnant, the prophet Isaiah, for example, if we take this hyper literally, which the Christians insist on taking Isaiah 53 hyper literally, it says it must be a man. It cannot be anyone but one singular individual. Well, if we take Isaiah 49 hyper literally, it says he said to me. Who's me? Isaiah. You are my servant Israel, about whom I will boast. So using their standard that Isaiah 53 can only refer to a singular individual because it says he, Isaiah 49:3, because it says me, must refer to Isaiah, which, by the way, is a legitimate rabbinic way to look at this. But it does not say that this me must refer exclusively to the Messiah and no one else. Could you say that it could have referred to the Messiah as well as Isaiah? Sure, why not? But once again, that's not exclusive to the Messiah. And if you're going to whine about this and say it's secret code word for Jesus, because the servant must be sinless, I will once again bring you to Matthew chapter 2, where it says, out of Egypt I called my son, which actually relates to this comment here, because in Exodus 4 verse 22, it says, Israel is my firstborn son. So that was his argument. So actually, this Jimmy, the Jew from Philly, is making a wonderful point, that Israel can be referred to in a collective as a son. So if we use that exegetically and apply that to Isaiah 49:3, then why can't the collective nation, or at the very least the remnant, a collective group of people, be referred to as the servant in Isaiah 49:3? David Wood, I'll debate you on that all day, every day. Because I literally had a debate about this with Dr. Brown, and they have no way out of this one. That's really the key to exploiting Isaiah 53 in the Christian interpretation, because the secret is that they think that Israel is secret code word for Jesus in Isaiah 49:3-6, because when you see the way the servant is described here, even though it says Israel, it's described in a very positive way. And anytime Israel is described in a positive way, they completely lose their mind and change the word Israel to really mean, well, it really means the secret code word for Jesus, which is classic eisegesis. So I really wish Tovia would have been wise to that in this debate. That is the biggest weakness, I would say, of the Christian position that most counter-missionaries don't know about. So if you're watching this, Jews, this is how you deal with it. Christians, we know your secret, so please like, share, and subscribe so that we can stop this myth from perpetuating that Israel is secret code word for Jesus in Isaiah 49:3, because this is the way that Christians think that they're able to undermine the fact that Israel is referred to as the servant in Isaiah 53, as well as Isaiah 49. Explicitly in Isaiah 49, but they claim it's the same servant. So do we. It's Israel, Messiah included. Even Tovia agrees. So,
but anyway, yeah. So the problem, Jimmy, is that I want to point out that I understand why people interpret Isaiah 53 as Israel. I don't think people are insane for interpreting that as Israel. I think that would be, if you didn't have Jesus, then that would be a plausible interpretation. It just doesn't fit nearly as well as Jesus. It doesn't fit. It's already been put. Matter of fact, Michael Brown pointed it out. This is the righteous. If this is the nation of Israel, if this is the nation of Israel, and it says he's righteous, the Torah specifically said that if the people are righteous, they would not be punished. So the idea is it can't refer to the people of Israel. It can't refer to Israel as a nation, because God specifically said, if you're righteous, then these things won't happen to you.
Well, what do we do? Psalm 44, easy. It's the prayer of the righteous remnant.
They're happening to the person in Isaiah 53, which can happen to a person. Tony already pointed out that this Job was righteous and he suffered horribly. And so that's kind of just one of the many issues. And we'll go.
It can happen to a remnant, a collective group of people, as we saw in Psalm 44. So it's just, they're talking out of both sides of their mouths. They don't know how to deal with these prophecies when it's explicitly right in their face. The parallelism, right? It is for your sake that we are killed all the time. We are considered as sheep for slaughter. You crushed us in place of servants. All this befallen us, and we have not forgotten you. Neither have we betrayed your covenant. That's the remnant. Even Dr. Brown agrees. Like I said, I have a video proving that.
Well, what do we do? Psalm 44, easy. It's the prayer of the righteous remnant.
Anyway, I wanted to end the video with this. This was a video I made a long time ago. It's called The Top 5 Mistakes Counter-Missionaries Make When Debating Christian Missionaries. Anyway, this gives a little bit of insight into my approach as to how I deal with when Christians try to use rabbinic commentaries to try to say it's about the Messiah.
And the number one mistake that counter-missionaries make when debating Christian missionaries is, that verse has nothing to do with the Messiah. We've all heard it. Even top-level counter-missionaries are heard commonly saying it. But missionaries who are well-studied in Judaism know it's our biggest exploit. The missionary claims Psalms 110 is about Jesus/Yeshua. The counter-missionary exclaims Psalms 110 has nothing to do with the Messiah. It's about King David. The missionary shoots back with a devilish grin. Oh yeah? Let's see what your rabbis have to say about that. And then the missionary quotes from some obscure midrash that links the subject of Psalms 110 to the future Messiah. Sure, it doesn't prove anything as far as the missionary's position on Jesus and Yeshua is concerned, but the missionary has accomplished their mission by making it appear as though we have contradicted the rabbis. The scenario plays out the same way with Isaiah 53. The counter-missionary insists that the servant refers to Israel, and the missionary proceeds to quote every rabbi in history who identified the servant with the Messiah. Yes, it's a cheap, dishonest tactic, as none of these rabbis believed that Jesus or Yeshua was the Messiah, but the missionary's objective is simply to make the Jewish position look disingenuous. They know that most Jews get uncomfortable with how apparently similar Isaiah 53 sounds to Jesus or Yeshua's death and supposed resurrection, when taken out of context, of course. So they go out of the way to highlight how our responses to them are not inclusive of all rabbinic opinions. This way, they can argue that we are hiding rabbinic opinions from them that are actually validating the New Testament's position on Jesus or Yeshua actually being the Messiah. There are a few ways we can deal with this. And one way is to gatekeep and keep the missionary, basically tell them that they are taking the rabbis out of context and attempt to explain to the missionary what the rabbis are actually saying, which usually results in a retraction of a previous statement, and we got to backtrack, which weakens our original position. And this is exactly what the missionary wants us to do. They don't care to hear us explain what the rabbis are really saying any more than we care to hear them explain to us what the Trinity really is. Or we could just admit that these passages are about the Messiah in the first place. What? You exclaim. Why in the world would you do that? Simple. It's the truth. Psalms 110, Isaiah 53, Daniel 7, 13 through 14, etc. They all have something to do with the Messiah. The rabbis tell us as much. In essence, they are all messianic on some level, but none of them are exclusively speaking about the Messiah. And that's the key to discovering the truth concerning the Messiah's true identity. Instead of denying the messianic nature of any given verse in the Tanach, simply accept the missionary's position that the verse in question is messianic. This way, you won't get caught off guard when the missionary pulls out that one obscure midrash that links Genesis 3:15 to the Messiah. Just as an example, just smile and nod and say something like, yes, every verse in the Tanakh can have some sort of messianic context to it on a deeper level, but I'm much more interested in exploring passages in the Tanakh that you and I both agree refer exclusively to the Messiah and no one else. This forces the missionary to refocus back onto the Tanakh rather than take you down a trail of, but the rabbis say this and the rabbis say that. Don't fall for the trap.
So that's, in a nutshell, my approach. And I know it's not maybe the most popular approach because, oh no, you're telling them that it's messianic. Well, Tovia Singer endorses this. This is endorsed by Rabbi Tovia Singer, my friends, right? He has changed his stance on approaching Isaiah 53, where now he will flat out say the servant can refer to the Messiah because the Messiah is a part of Israel. The servant is still Israel, just the Messiah is included in it. That is the approach that we take when debating this. And it exploits their abuse of Isaiah 49, when they try to say that it's only about the Messiah, even though it says Israel, shows their eisegesis, because nowhere in the Tanakh is the word Israel used to refer exclusively to the Messiah, son of David, and no one else. And you can use Psalms 44 to prove that the remnant can die, even though they are, following the Torah and following the covenant. They can still suffer and be seen as sheep for slaughter and be forsaken by God, even though they're keeping the covenant. So it's not exclusive to righteous individuals, as Anthony Rogers tried to erroneously say. And ultimately, this will bring healing to the nations when they overdo the punishment in the final war of Gog and Magog, when they come up from year to year to celebrate the Festival of Tabernacles, also known as Sukkot, and they will come up to the Jews and say, "We have heard that God is with you." So, we have debunked thoroughly Dr. Michael Brown's position. Anyone wants to debate this topic with me, I laid out my position. Any takers? Please like, share, and subscribe, and share this knowledge, because we're ready. The world is ready for this truth. Let's be that light so that Isaiah 49 can come to fruition and we can be a light to the Gentiles. I hope this video has been a blessing to you all. Shalom Aleichem.